She stood in front of the mirror, finally thin, finally beautiful, finally worthy of attention, and that's when she made the biggest mistake of her life. Her name is Delilah. She's 27 years old, and what she's about to tell you is a confession that cost her everything she ever wanted. Hey everyone, it's Emma, your storyteller here at Mrs. Emma. And today's story is one that left me absolutely speechless. It's about transformation, about love, about the dangerous lies we tell ourselves when we think we've outgrown the people who loved us first. So settle in, because Delilah's story is about to change how you think about relationships, self-improvement, and what it really means to deserve better. Delilah spent most of her 20s feeling like a ghost, not the scary kind, the kind that people simply looked through as if she wasn't even there. She was 100 pounds overweight. She wore the same 3 oversized hoodies on rotation because nothing else fit right. And honestly, she'd stopped caring. Every night looked the same. Takeout containers, the glow of the television, another evening lost to numbness and the comfortable prison of her own depression. And beside her, every single night, was Eric. Eric wasn't a movie star. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't have a corner office or a luxury car or the kind of jaw that made women stop and stare. He was just Eric. Average height, receding hairline. The kind of guy who preferred video games to nightclubs and pizza to fancy restaurants. But here's the thing about Eric that Delilah wouldn't understand until it was far too late. He was there. Through every pound gained and every tear shed and every night when she couldn't find a single reason to love herself, Eric was right there beside her, choosing her. Every single day. They'd been together for 9 years when he finally proposed. And the proposal itself tells you everything you need to know about who Eric really was. It was a random Tuesday. Their apartment was cluttered with leftover Chinese food containers. The carpet had stains they'd both stopped noticing years ago. Eric got down on one knee right there in the middle of their messy, imperfect life, and he pulled out a ring that probably represented months of his salary from a job that would never make him rich. He looked up at her with those honest eyes and said the words that should have meant everything. "I love you exactly as you are. I want to spend forever with you." Delilah said yes, but something shifted inside her the moment that ring slipped onto her finger, something that would eventually destroy everything they'd built together. The very next week, Delilah announced her plan. She was going to lose the weight, all of it. She refused to set a wedding date until she'd reached her goal. Eric was confused. He kept telling her she was beautiful already. He kept saying they didn't need to wait. But Delilah didn't want to hear it. In her mind, his acceptance of her body was proof that he didn't understand, that he'd simply never been with anyone better looking and didn't know what he was missing. She started her weight loss journey with a determination that surprised even herself. And Eric, being Eric, tried to be supportive in all the wrong ways. He'd offer to exercise with her, then suggest they reward themselves with pizza afterward. He'd buy her protein bars, then look wounded when she wouldn't split dessert with him anymore. Looking back, Delilah would realize he was trying. He was trying so hard to be part of her journey while terrified of what that journey might cost him. But at the time, all she saw was someone trying to hold her back. The pounds started melting away. Week after week, month after month. Her body transformed into something she barely recognized. And with every pound lost, something else changed too. The world started seeing her. Cashiers who'd never given her a second glance suddenly smiled when she approached. Men held doors open for her, made eye contact, lingered just a moment longer than necessary. Women who'd once looked right through her now invited her into conversations, included her in plans, treated her like she belonged. It was intoxicating. After years of invisibility, Delilah was finally being seen. And she liked it. She liked it far more than she should have. Eric noticed the changes too. He'd make nervous little jokes about how she was going to forget about him once she was skinny. He'd tell her he was proud of her. But there was something underneath his words. Something that sounded like fear. And instead of reassuring him, instead of recognizing that fear for what it was, Delilah found it annoying. By month 8, Delilah had lost 80 pounds. Her body had transformed completely, and so had the way men looked at her. The barista at her favorite coffee shop started drawing little hearts in her foam. A coworker who'd never spoken to her before suddenly found excuses to stop by her desk every single day. Even Eric's own friend Tyler made a comment at dinner one night about how lucky Eric was getting. As if Delilah was some kind of prize Eric was winning just by existing beside her. That comment planted a seed in Delilah's mind that would grow into something poisonous. She started asking herself a question that would change everything. Was Eric really that lucky? Or was she the one who'd been settling all along? When she finally hit her goal weight, 100 pounds down from where she'd started, Delilah looked in the mirror and saw a stranger staring back. A stranger with options. Real options. Options she'd never had before. Eric threw her a small celebration dinner at their apartment. Just the two of them, takeout from her favorite healthy restaurant, candles on the table. He kept telling her how amazing she looked, how proud he was, how much he loved her. But Delilah couldn't focus on his words. All she could see was his same old hoodie, slightly worn at the sleeves. All she could think about was the contrast between him and all the successful, ambitious, attractive men who'd been paying attention to her lately. Men who were taller. Men who were wealthier. Men who looked like they belonged with the new version of her. Eric was still treating her like she was the same girl who'd said yes to his proposal in their messy apartment. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She was better now. And she was starting to believe she deserved better too. The grocery store became Delilah's favorite place, and not because of the food. That's where she met him. A man who was everything Eric wasn't. Tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of smile that belonged in commercials, designer clothes, an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. He approached her by the organic produce and complimented her tattoo. His eyes flickered to her engagement ring, but he asked for her number anyway. That's confidence, Delilah thought to herself. That's what a real man does when he sees something he wants. She told Eric about it that night. Not to be cruel, she told herself, just to share her day, like couples do. But the look on Eric's face told a different story. He asked questions she found annoying. What did this guy look like? What exactly did he say? Did she give him her number? When she said no, he seemed relieved. Then he made a comment about how her ring should be protection enough from other men. Protection. Like she needed protecting from better options. Something inside Delilah hardened that night. Then there was the personal trainer at her gym. He was everything Eric refused to become. Sculpted muscles, endless energy, always finding reasons to stand just a little too close while helping with her form. He started texting her workout tips and motivational quotes, and Delilah found herself checking her phone constantly, hoping to see his name. His messages made her feel something Eric's boring, "How was your day?" texts never could. At work, things got even more complicated. A new guy had been hired for management training. Fresh out of his MBA program, always wearing expensive watches, drove a car that cost more than Eric made in a year. He started eating lunch at Delilah's table, talking about his plans to climb the corporate ladder, maybe start his own business someday. He had ambition. He had drive. He had a vision for his future that didn't involve video games and takeout on the couch. Meanwhile, Eric had been doing the same job for 3 years with no plans to change. When Delilah would mention this new coworker's success at dinner, Eric would just shrug and change the subject. The contrast was becoming impossible to ignore. One night, after a few glasses of wine had loosened her tongue, Delilah decided to be honest with Eric. She told him about her dreams. Not the sanitized version she'd shared before, the real ones. She told him she'd been dreaming about being with someone more successful. Someone taller, more financially stable. Someone who looked like they belonged with the new version of her. Someone with a corner office instead of a cubicle. Someone who wore suits instead of graphic t-shirts. She told him about all the attention she'd been getting. The grocery store guy. The trainer who always made time for her. The coworker who treated her like an equal instead of something fragile. Eric stared at her like she was speaking a language he'd never heard before. Then he asked her if she wanted to call off the engagement. Delilah was frustrated by his response. She wasn't asking to break up. She was trying to motivate him. She wanted him to step up, to become the man she now believed she deserved. All this honesty was supposed to inspire him to be better. Instead, he just got quiet. Wouldn't look at her. Said he needed time to think. Think about what? Delilah wondered. About whether he was finally going to become the man she deserved? or whether he was going to keep being this basic, unambitious guy who wanted to marry her at some cheap venue with wholesale flowers. The next morning, something in Eric had changed. He barely said good morning, poured his coffee without looking at her. When she tried to talk about the night before, he said they'd discuss it later and left for work without kissing her goodbye. In 9 years together, that had never happened. Not once. All day at work, Delilah replayed their conversation in her head. Maybe she'd been too honest. But wasn't honesty what relationships were supposed to be built on? She wasn't asking Eric to become someone completely different. She was just asking him to be better. Her coworker noticed something was wrong and offered to grab coffee after work to talk. He was such a good listener. Asked thoughtful questions. Actually seemed to care about her feelings instead of getting defensive like Eric always did. When Delilah got home that evening, Eric had made dinner. He'd cleaned the entire apartment too, which immediately made her suspicious. Eric only cleaned when something was seriously wrong. During the meal, he kept looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Finally, he set down his fork and said they needed to talk about what she'd told him the night before. Delilah braced herself. She expected him to either promise to change or to break down emotionally about his hurt feelings. What she didn't expect was calm. Eric looked at her with clear, steady eyes and told her he'd spent the entire day thinking about everything she'd said. About her dreams of other men. About deserving better. About the life she believed she was entitled to now. And he'd made a decision. He was calling off the wedding, not postponing it, not pausing to work on things, canceling it completely. Delilah laughed. She actually laughed, because this was Eric, the man who took 3 weeks to decide what to order at a restaurant, the man who'd never made a decisive move in his entire life. But Eric wasn't laughing. He told her that she was right. She did deserve better than him, but he also deserved better than someone who fantasized about other men and constantly made him feel inadequate. He said he'd loved her for 9 years exactly as she was, but he couldn't love someone who saw him as a placeholder until something better came along. Delilah tried to explain. She wasn't actually looking for someone else. She was trying to motivate him to be better for them. All those comments about other men, all her honesty about wanting more, it was supposed to inspire him to step up his game. But Eric just shook his head. He said he was tired of feeling like he was auditioning for her approval every single day. He said the woman he'd proposed to would never have told him she dreamed about other men. That woman had loved him. But this new version of Delilah only loved the idea of who he might become if he completely changed everything about himself. The worst part was how he said it. Not angry, not crying, just tired. Like he'd already grieved the relationship and was simply delivering news she hadn't caught up to yet. He told her he'd stay with a friend while they figured out how to separate their lives. 9 years together, and he was ready to walk away because she'd been honest about her feelings. Delilah asked if this was really what he wanted, if he was seriously going to let his ego destroy their entire relationship. Eric's answer changed everything. He said it wasn't about ego, it was about self-respect. He said he deserved to be with someone who chose him enthusiastically every single day, not someone who settled for him while shopping around for better options. Before he walked out the door, Eric did something that broke Delilah in a way she didn't understand until much later. He took off his ring, set it on the kitchen counter, right next to hers. Then he looked at her one last time and said he hoped she found everything she was looking for. He hoped whoever ended up with her would be enough for the person she'd become. And then he left. No big fight, no dramatic scene, just a man who'd finally found the courage to choose himself. The first few weeks after Eric left felt like freedom. Delilah could go to the gym without 20 text messages asking when she'd be home. She could grab drinks with her coworker without having to explain herself. She could flirt with her trainer without guilt. For the first time in years, she felt completely free to be the new version of herself, without anyone trying to pull her backward. She threw herself into her new life with everything she had. Her coworker introduced her to his circle of young professionals, people who talked about goals and success instead of complaining about their jobs. Her trainer started meeting her for weekend hikes and helped her plan an even more intense fitness routine. Even that guy from the grocery store tracked her down and took her to an expensive restaurant downtown. For a few months, Delilah felt vindicated. This was exactly what she'd been missing with Eric. These men took her to places Eric never would have thought to go. They had conversations about things that mattered. But then the mask started slipping. Her coworker, the one who'd seemed so interested in her as a person, started making it clear he expected their friendship to become physical. When she mentioned she was still processing her breakup, he grew impatient. Told her she needed to figure out what she wanted because he wasn't interested in playing games. Her trainer turned out to be seeing 3 other women from the gym. When Delilah brought up wanting something more serious, he laughed in her face and said he thought she understood he wasn't the relationship type. The grocery store guy was the worst. After 2 expensive dinners, he made it clear he expected payment. When she said she wasn't ready for that kind of intimacy, he got aggressive. Ugly. Showed her exactly who he'd been underneath all that confidence. The realization hit Delilah like a truck. None of these men were interested in her as a person. They'd seen an attractive woman clearly going through relationship problems and figured she was vulnerable. Easy. Available. The successful, ambitious, confident men she'd been so impressed by weren't looking for love. They were looking for entertainment. And they saw her as exactly that. Meanwhile, Delilah started hearing things about Eric through mutual friends. He'd gotten a promotion at work. A big one. Apparently, he'd been working toward it for months but had never mentioned it to her. He'd started going to therapy, started working out regularly, started putting effort into himself in ways he never had before. Their friend Sarah posted pictures from a hiking trip, and there was Eric, looking different, healthier, happier, more confident than she'd ever seen him. He was becoming the man she'd wanted him to be, just without her. The worst moment came 6 months after their breakup. Delilah was at the grocery store, the same one where that confident man had asked for her number, when she saw Eric in the next aisle over. He wasn't alone. There was a woman beside him, not dramatically beautiful, probably around the same size Delilah had been when she and Eric first met. But this woman was laughing at something Eric had said, looking at him like he was the most interesting person in the world. The way Delilah used to look at him, back when she appreciated what she had instead of constantly wanting more. Eric noticed her, gave a polite nod, but he didn't come over to talk, just continued shopping with this woman who clearly adored him exactly as he was. And standing there, watching them walk away together, Delilah finally understood. Eric had never been the problem. She had. She'd taken a man who loved her unconditionally and made him feel worthless because he didn't fit some fantasy she'd built in her head. She'd traded something real for the illusion of something better, and now she was alone. Perfect body, empty apartment, dating apps full of men who saw her as nothing more than a temporary distraction. The irony wasn't lost on Delilah. She finally had all the attention she'd ever wanted. Men noticed her everywhere she went. Heads turned, numbers were offered, compliments flowed freely. But it was all surface level. Nobody wanted to know the real her anymore. They just wanted the package she'd wrapped herself in. Eric knew her when she was nobody special. He'd seen her at her absolute worst and loved her anyway. He'd proposed on a stained carpet with a ring he could barely afford because being with her mattered more than any of that. And she'd thrown it all away because she convinced herself she deserved better. Now she was supposedly somebody special. And nobody loved her at all. So that's Delilah's story. A woman who worked so hard to transform her outside that she forgot to examine what was happening inside. A woman who confused attention with love and ambition with character. A woman who destroyed the one person who truly saw her because she'd convinced herself that being seen by everyone was the same as being loved by someone. I want you to think about something. Eric didn't leave because his ego was bruised. He left because he finally found his self-respect. He realized that loving someone who was constantly searching for something better wasn't love at all. It was a trap. And maybe that's the lesson here. The people who love us at our worst aren't settling. They're choosing. Every single day, they're making a choice to stay. And if we spend all our time looking for something better, we might just lose the best thing we ever had. Delilah learned that lesson too late. But maybe you don't have to. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own relationships and the people who've chosen you through thick and thin, please hit that like button. It really does help the channel grow, and it lets me know these stories matter to you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone who's going through changes in their own life and needs a reminder about what really matters. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Mrs. Emma and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. I'm here every week with new tales of love, loss, and the lessons we learned too late. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. This is Emma, your storyteller, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.